And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. Welcome to IT Career in Australia live stream. So, tonight's topic is how to structure your tech team in startup versus corporate. And we have Grant as our guest speaker tonight. So, I always encourage you guys to say hi in the comments. Please, please, please say hi, your name, anything in the comments, because if you're not mentioning anything in the comments, we don't know that you're here. And this is quite disappointing, to be honest. So if you're new to my live show, I'm Jana Martins, and I'm currently working in IT consultancy. So I'm passionate about learning more about present and the future of tech industry. So, and also I'm sharing my findings with you on this YouTube channel. As I said, tonight our topic is how to structure your tech team in startup versus corporate. And Grant is going to share his experience, pretty funny memes, and pretty good examples. So can't wait for the memes. So, stick around for those ones. Obviously, incredibly relevant topic for anyone who want to structure their new team. So make sure to tag and share it with your colleagues and friends who need to hear this. So before I pass it over to Grant to introduce himself, I just want to remind you that we're going live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So if you want to watch replays, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, IT Career in Australia. I'm going live there every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Melbourne time, with various experts from my network. And we're talking about all the things around IT career, job search, and specifics of IT industry in Australia. So we will try to answer all your questions from all the platforms, but please stay on the topic. But ask as many questions as you want. And usually the most active participants also receive a nice surprise at the end of the stream. And as usual, I always encourage you, please use this live stream not only as your opportunity to learn new information, but to network with people in the industry. So few people joining us. Catherine is here. Thank you for saying hi, Catherine. You see? People saying hi in the comments. So, and I know that you're watching and you're not saying hi. So that's enough of me. And passing on to Grant to introduce himself.
Cool, thanks Yana, and great to be here. One of my favourite topics, talking about team and org design. So my name's Grant Simonds. I work as an Agile and DevOps coach at Epic Agile at the moment, usually consulting into different clients. And before that, I've worked in startups. So I worked in Telstra for quite a few years in the media and IoT kind of space, and also in their agile transformation. Before that, I ran my own startup called MComms TV for about 8 years as well, I think. And that was a really interesting kind of experience. But yeah, worked in kind of telco and IT and software industries for a while now. So one of really great topics to talk about tonight, kind of team design, structuring teams. So thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Grant. And Smail is saying hi as well, because I've asked twice. Thank you, Smail. Good afternoon, everyone. Such a rainy day in Melbourne. Yeah, indeed. And it's a storm warning tomorrow as well. So obviously, guys, stay home and keep warm for tomorrow. Okay. Obviously, Grant, you had experience, working in a big corporate, and you also had your own startup. So obviously, it was the different teams here and there. But I guess let's start from the beginning. Why are you actually, passionate about this topic, and why are you interested to talk about it tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I started my startup, I had no real idea about team design, and by the end, I kind of realised that it's one of the things that makes the big difference to really any team, whether it's a corporate or a startup. Exactly. I love. There's a great. I want to start off. There's a great African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's really good. In a startup company, quite often, if you're starting by yourself, you feel like you can go fast by working on your own, by hacking away at some idea, and it's fantastic. And you get to a point where you get a little bit of traction, and you start to have to scale the team, and then it becomes very hard to scale yourself. So then you start building your team up, and that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. Is building that team to kind of support what you want to develop as well.
Yeah, I love this quote. It makes so much sense. I guess not only in the tech industry, but basically probably we can apply it anywhere in life. But yeah, makes total sense when you're thinking about this, the growing your startup.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think in the corporate world as well, the real basis of any corporate is teams and teams of teams, and taking it further to teams of teams of teams, and that's when it starts to get a bit messy as well. So a little bit harder to do in bigger corporates.
Yeah, it's probably a bit slower as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Takes a lot longer.
So I guess we're talking about just the structure and the difference between the structure in the startup and the corporate. And I guess why does it need to be different? Why the structure need to be different in the corporate and the startup?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, isn't it? I think to start with, you have to look at the differences between startups and corporates. So typically, corporates, you've got a fairly stable job and salary, whereas in a startup, maybe you've got a fluctuating salary. Maybe it starts off small. Maybe you've got more kind of benefits. Maybe you get options, that kind of thing. On the corporate side, you've usually got fairly clear roles and responsibilities of what you need to do in your role. In a startup, it's completely open, right? You kind of want everyone to chip in and do whatever's needed to get the job done. Biggest difference in a corporate, of course, is typically they're public companies with shareholders. Shareholders have expectations. They want predictable, predictable income, predictable revenue, predictable profits from the company, and therefore that leads to kind of bigger teams and bigger org structures to support that predictability. Whereas in a startup, you're really going for growth. So maybe once as part of that growth, you've got access to equity, so your budgets are changing potentially, at random times almost. You've probably got a smaller team that you're trying to grow, and you might even have no org structure, right? It might just be all in, or a couple of people working on something to start with, and then as you grow, you've got to try and implement some kind of structure to piece it all together and support that kind of scaling. So I think it's interesting actually to look at the difference in goals as well between a corporate and a startup, right? They've got very different goals. As I said, corporates are all about maintaining stability, predictability, market share. You've usually got budgets, and it's usually important to stick to the budget. It's very hard to get extra budget if you find out some new information or you want to do something different. And effectively, it's all about reducing risk for everybody, for shareholders, for execs, for managers, and that trickles down to everyone else. Whereas a startup's like the opposite. A startup's really there to experiment and to test and learn and kind of maybe even build a new market or a new business model as you raise funding and effectively like rapidly grow markets and customers to do that. So
yeah, you never know when the money coming in.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got a certain runway, don't you? But you've got to prove that your idea works before you run out of money, and then maybe if you can prove the idea works, you get more investment and kind of grow the company that way as well.
Yeah, the catch-22. I need more people to get more money, and I need more money to get more people.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon though a startup is if you look at like in a corporate, I always dream of running a team in a corporate like the same way as you run a team in a startup, like which is just basically do stuff and experiment like that. So I see a startup as like the ideal team. Corporate is more of the compromise.
Or like trying not to be compromised, but still happen to be a compromise. But I guess, okay, so we have different goals in the corporate. You want to maybe eliminate risk more. You already have budget set up. You have more clear responsibilities and a bit more chaos and mess with the startup teams. And I guess the goals of the teams would be different as well when we compare, corporate teams with those startups teams.
Yeah, I think that's alignment as well, isn't it? Like in a startup, typically you're incentivizing your team with maybe options, or they're really tightly aligned to the goal of the company. That you may, if you're in the office, you may even have everyone sit in the same room. But yeah, typically goals of teams is like maximize the value delivered continuously, sustainably. It's more of a corporate goal, isn't it? Aligned to the business strategy. In a corporate, you really want your teams to be long-lived and autonomous. And autonomous means that they can almost determine what they work on themselves within the guardrails of what the corporate's mission is, I guess, what their goals are, and then evolve that over the lifetime of the team. I guess in a startup, it's evolving much more quickly, the team, and you basically just adding people to it when you have a need, when you have the money to do that.
Yeah, when you have a need or money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you have a good person come across.
Well, that's it, isn't it? You see a lot of maybe the larger startup companies, maybe the scale up and tech companies have a policy that we're always employing people. So when we find good people, we just bring them on and find a spot for them, and that kind of influences how the teams work as well.
Yep.
I've never seen that in a corporate, but maybe there's some that do that. That'd be nice to see. But typically in a corporate, right, you've got to go and get headcount and budget to employ someone, and it's a long lead time. When I started work at Telstra, I did the job interview in June, and I started work in September. So what's that, about 4 months to actually get it approved and get all the paperwork and everything else done there to make that work.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess with the scale ups, if they come across, if they're interviewing for one role and they really, really like two people, there is a chance that they will hire them both to find, and find something to do. Because I guess the roles that you mentioned just before, the roles and responsibilities not as defined as well. So I guess in scale up, you can always find something to do and adapt to your responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the company that I work for at the moment, Epic Agile, actually has a policy of just continuously employing people. So maybe that's a good example that as soon as you find good people, you grab them and then try and match them to the work that needs to be done as well.
Yeah.
But I think in those different places, the kind of org charts are very different in how those companies are actually put together and where they fit their people in. So I think in a corporate, you typically have multiple layers of management. I don't know what this is. I kind of drew this as a typical org chart. So what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4 layers maybe there, and then you've got your kind of team. And you can imagine that there might be multiple teams, 20, 30, 50, 100 teams, kind of similar designs there with different layers to the org chart. There's different variations of this, of course, with different kind of matrices and different people reporting different differences. But essentially, your corporate is a bit of a siloed kind of structure where each part of the silo looks after one particular piece of functionality in the team. Whereas I guess in a startup org, it's a bit of a flatter org structure, right? You might not even have an org structure. I love the idea that kind of startups start with 3 people typically: the hacker, the hustler, and the hipster. So typically the hacker is your developer.
This is so true.
It's your developer or CTO. You've got your hustler. Always the CEO is the hustler trying to get out and get customers and and investors, and then you've got your hipster. Maybe if, especially for front end kind of products, apps and websites, then this is the person that's really in the kind of customer experience and looking after the design and those sort of things. So it's a nice combination of people. Typically, that means you've got like a lot of typically your team. If it's the first team, typically you got to employ a lot of developers because I think usually the CTO is going to be the run that runs out of capacity first, and they want more software developed, more things done. Maybe the CEO employs some salespeople or something else, or some people to help with the hustle, and then maybe the hipster is going to employ a few extra UX designers to help look after customer kind of needs. But yeah, that's really the team, and the team's really in a startup really cross functional, right? You're really looking at your developers to maybe even to do testing, to look after the operations of the product, to deploy it, to code it, to basically do whatever's necessary to get the software out there and get it in customers' hands and keep it working. Whereas in a corporate, you probably more very tightly defined roles. You might have the operations team, the sales team, the UX team. So you tend to have a lot of handovers in the work between teams, which starts to get a little bit slower. And yeah, you get some nice politics and things involved there as well in those handovers usually.
For sure. Guys who joining us today. Actually, we didn't say hi to Rob. Rob is here. Saying hi to us, and Luke is here as well. Thank you guys
G'day,
for saying hi. I guess the question for you guys who's listening also: do you agree? Do you agree with this startup chat? Like when you think about all the startups that around you or you deal with, like do you feel this is accurate structure of hacker, hustle, and hipster?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? What are the roles in your startup? Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's pretty accurate. We always have this person who just so passionate about technology, and they just want to sit and code and hack everything possible, and and the person who want to hustle and get it out there. For sure, like we see it in a lot of tech startup all the time. But Grant, I guess the question is, do they need to have a plan? Like we're kind of talking about now, the CTO hire a few devs, the hustler will hire a few salespeople. But do you feel like, and you mentioned you had your startup before, do you feel like you wish you had the structure in mind before you start, just hiring good people?
That's a good question. I don't really know. Yeah.
Or like, do we need to have a structure in mind straight away, or is it just more like a natural flow? We see good people, we hire them, and then naturally we create some sort of structure for our startup team.
Yeah, I did not have a plan in mind at all when I started my startup for the team structure. Should you have that? I don't know. It was never a huge problem for me. I was more in the case of kind of hiring people, good people, as I could get them. I probably made the mistake of hiring salespeople too early, so I should have probably hired some more developers and kind of built that team up first before I hired more sales kind of people. I think every startup founder has it in the back of their mind what their vision is for the startup, but usually that's in terms of, hey, I want to be the best at whatever they are in this particular market, or I want to have the best product or service. You don't tend to think about, gee, I want to have the best team. You kind of think, hey, I need some good people, but I don't really know what that looks like until you kind of add the next person. And every person you add to the team changes the dynamic a little bit. So then you might need to hire someone with slightly different skills as the third next kind of hire sort of thing. So yeah, I didn't have a good plan. I think in a corporate, you're more about planning. So I was lucky enough. I mentioned I worked in Telstra. I worked as a product owner there, and the product owners there were lucky enough to be able to source resources from any of the functional areas. So you could kind of build a team that you wanted, and if you find that you had too many UXs, you could say, hey, I'm going to give a UX designer back to the pool, and I'll get another developer or something like that. So you could kind of change maybe like once a quarter. That actually worked pretty flexibly, but you're always trying to get the best people. Even in a corporate, you're trying to call in favors and whatever. Hey, I want the best developer, I want the best tester in my team. And trying to attract them to your team is a bit of back and forth as well.
Like
That's
mini fight between little startups.
yeah. It is like a mini startup, isn't it? You're trying to get the best people, trying to almost recruit them internally, even though they've already got a job. You want them to work on your idea in a kind of corporate as well. But often that's not the case, right? It's a bit more fixed, and you're kind of employing people for long term.
Yeah.
So yeah, need to be a bit more planned.
Malcolm have a comment around the organizational chart. That's a type of organizational chart corporates trying to implement and adopting agile. After a while, the layers hierarchy start to reemerge.
Yeah, that can happen, can't it? I guess the two types I've seen in corporates and startups is where you've got the sort of siloed hierarchical architecture where effectively everyone in the team works for the manager, reports to the manager of the team, and maybe the manager of the team is also the kind of product owner, sort of directing priorities and that for the team. The other, which we didn't really draw there, but is more of a matrix organisation where you have a chapter lead type manager, where you've got people reporting to the chapter lead. So you might have a chapter of UX designers, a chapter of developers, a chapter of testers, for example, and then you have a separate product owner which grabs people out of from those chapters to resource their team. So certainly that's the model that Telstra went with. I've seen the other model as well. I was talking to a guy from a well-known scale-up company in Australia who's pretty into how should we say agile management tools. The company listed on the in what I think it's NYC. They're listed, aren't they? And they were sort of, he was describing his org structure, and effectively they've got the structure where the developers, they're all engineers in the team, and they report to the manager for the team who kind of acts as the product owner role, prioritizing work and that sort of thing. So I think a lot of the more kind of tech companies are going down that kind of org chart.
Yeah. But you mentioned the structure, where you have a pool of people that you can, get in your team and maybe swap. But does it make it, I guess from the efficiency point, then you have someone working on a particular product for a longer time, they know that product better, and suddenly, they're swapping to another product. How this affect efficiency?
Yeah, that's always an interesting one, isn't it? Because you get experts that have the knowledge, that have been there for a long time, they've worked in the team for a long time. But what happens if they leave the company or the team or get hit by a bus or whatever? So you're trying to build up, trying to have sort of it's it's a bus problem, isn't it? How do you get other people trained up in that skill in the team? And I think the way to do that is you kind of have to force it. You actually have to force other people rather than the expert in the team to take on that kind of work in order to learn. But by doing that, you're actually going slower than. So if a junior developer takes on some work that an expert developer was doing before, they're going to go slower for a bit while they learn that. But then you take a bit of a hit to productivity for a little bit, but then you've got two people in the team that maybe know that area. So hopefully
coming back to that quote, yeah.
yeah, you're kind of going faster, aren't you? Overall, there's a bit of it like that, isn't it? It's a bit of a compromise. You got to slow down in order to go faster.
Yeah. If you want to, be in the long term, I guess, which could be tricky for the startup sometimes, because for the startup it could be just the timing, and if they miss the particular timeline, they miss the money that they had for this particular runway, that they might miss out on a big opportunity.
Yeah, it's a bit of a worry, isn't it? If you've got developers or key staff leaving a startup early on, that's a bit of a sign that they're not not really interested in the idea, or maybe the idea is not so good. So investors may be getting a bit nervous by that kind of thing happening as well.
And I guess, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna go on. One of the interesting things I've seen in corporates is the tendency to like we want cross-functional teams and teams that can kind of own a feature from end to end. One of the typical traps corporates tend to fall into is having really big teams, because that's because each person in the team actually isn't cross-skilled. They just focus on their speciality. So in order to build a team, you actually need a lot of people to cover enough specialities to kind of to police something valuable end to end. So you end up with a lot of people in the team, which then starts to slow the team down as well, having too many people in it.
And I think you want to mention, the typical, I guess, the typical squad design as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to say the first one, Jeff Bezos was right. The two pizza team is the most efficient team, which is about 7 people. So between about 5 and 9 people is really the most efficient number for a team. And that the reason for that is the number of communication paths between people in the team. So as the number of people in the team grows, the number of communication paths increases exponentially. So it really gets difficult for all the team members to know each other and trust each other once you get past about 9 or maybe 10 people. So yeah, the first thing is to limit the team size, which then has a really interesting impact in corporates, is that you can't put all these different specialists into your team. You've got to start to cross-skill people, which is a really hard step for a lot of corporates to kind of admit that people need to learn things from other areas. Maybe they don't need to be the best at it, but they need to know a little bit about other areas in order to be able to do a little bit of work and keep the team size small, and which therefore makes it kind of run efficiently as a kind of cross-functional team. What are the others? Inverse combine maneuver. Cross-functional team is probably the most important one. Biz dev ops, right? So the team has representatives from the business, has representatives from dev and ops. So the team effectively they can come up with an idea for a feature, develop a feature, and then operate that feature. So own the features, own the things in the product from cradle to grave, end to end, and that turns out to be the most efficient way to do things without any handovers to other teams, which kind of minimises the dependencies and keeps the flow of work flowing nicely within the team.
And so, like this particular, squad design, do you think we can apply the same design for teams in the corporate and the same design for the startup? Do you think that the actual design of the team would be the same regardless if it's a corporate or a startup, or would it be different?
Yeah, I mean, I think corporates would love to run teams like a startup runs them, but unfortunately, corporates put a few constraints on, like predictability, budget, and things like reporting and reducing risk. So typically, what you find in a corporate team is that there's somebody in the team responsible for budget, reducing risk, being predictable, and kind of experimentation is a little bit less important, or seen to be less important in a corporate, because they can't kind of tolerate the risk that comes with that experimental approach. So usually you find, I've got a lot of friends that are project managers, but usually find a lot of project managers in corporate teams. You don't find too many project managers in startup companies. It's more all about just getting down and doing the work rather than looking at managing the work quite as much, because startups don't need to be predictable. They just want to get the job done, prove that their idea works, and they don't really need a plan for that. Especially if it's just one team, they don't have dependencies on other teams. They don't have to wait for anyone else. They can just get down to business and do it. So you find a lot more management reporting in corporates, just because of what I guess it trickles down from shareholders in terms of reducing risk and maintaining budgets and all those sort of things that corporates need to do.
And I guess you mentioned about team size. Yeah, so we talk about the communication that obviously as more people we have, as more communication levels we need. And I think also there's a slide here in terms of trust.
Yeah,
As more
it's
people we have, it's harder to build this trust factor as well.
yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the key to it. Is you want everyone in the team to be able to trust each other really closely in order to work well together. And as you add more people to the team, that level of trust is not as deep. So 5 people turns out to be the optimum number of people that we can hold close personal relationships with in working memory. As we get to sort of 15, 50, 150, we have less trust. So in a corporate, we use those numbers, especially between the 50 and 150, to structure teams of teams. So maybe if our teams are a sort of 5 to 9 people, then we can say maybe we have kind of 10 teams working together as a team of teams, or some corporates will call it a tribe or a group or a crew. And that's kind of the limit of those numbers, where people kind of know each other, know roughly what they're doing, but don't have quite as much trust as they do within their own team.
Yeah, so if it's more 150 people, you won't remember people's names, yeah? But
It's
we
going to be
kind
hard.
of probably just remember, like I probably can remember, yeah. If I'll have some interaction with people, I probably remember 100 people names. Like,
Yeah, I find it hard to remember people's names these days without their name at the bottom of the screen. So it's a bit harder in person.
I'm Yana.
Yeah, I can see your name on the screen. That works for me.
But I guess, using it corporate, but I guess we can apply it to the startup as well, in terms of if your startup is more than 15 people, maybe you need to start thinking about, splitting the teams, or start thinking about how, the people communicate between each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That's when you start to scale your startup. Is maybe that's a bit of a tricky point, isn't it? Is how do you then structure that into more than one team? Do you split the functionality? Do you get one team to work on one piece of functionality or one piece of the product, and the other team to work on something else? That's really the key decision. And even in corporates, when you're structuring multiple teams, is how do you split the work between multiple teams? I'd say the biggest mess I've seen in corporates, and it happens in lots of them, right, is typically in IT, where you've got 5 or 10 teams working on exactly the same thing. How do you direct the work to one team or another? Typically, you need some kind of manager involved to route work between teams, and that actually disempowers the teams, because now the teams are not in control of their own work. They've got a manager kind of calling the shots, which then sort of reduces the enthusiasm of the teams to work on those things and to come up with ideas of their own. So yeah, even in a corporate, best way is to split up your product somehow along some lines. We call it fracture planes, in terms of how the work's split into the 2 or more different teams, and to kind of minimise the dependencies and have a nice clean interface as to how the teams kind of communicate with each other. Really important. That's the most important thing, I think. But when the multiple
and
teams.
that's actually the question Rob have regarding the organizational chart. So it shows the view. Is there a view of how team interact? I think you actually kind of have a slide that kind of
we could
kind of show it.
Maybe that's how teams in a few different companies interact with each other. I like the Facebook one. It's interesting. Isn't
I like the Microsoft one. No wonder LinkedIn's so slow.
Yeah,
nothing against LinkedIn, but
there is, there is a model. I haven't got a slide for it, but there are. It is. We can design some purposeful communication between teams. So we want to try and minimise the need for high bandwidth communication between teams. We obviously want our teams to communicate with each other to solve problems, but we want to keep the high bandwidth communication within the team, where there's a small number of people. They can communicate quickly and probably meet daily with each other. And then we want to design our teams so that we split them in a way that they don't need to communicate every day or at a high bandwidth with other teams in the organisation. If they needed to do that, that would tend to slow down, and you tend to get dependencies in there that block the teamwork between two teams kind of working. There's a great book on it. Maybe we put the next slide up on the 4 team types. Great book on it. I know Luke is a big fan of the book. I've got to put it. It's going to be fuzzy. I'm going to put the team topologies book on the screen.
Just hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Here you go.
Hold it in my face. Yeah.
Next to your face.
Oh, there we go. I can get it now. Beautiful. Yep. Go and buy the book. That's probably the best book and best method around for designing teams in corporates. They talk about the 4 team types and how those teams collaborate with each other and communicate with each other using different methods of communication. So this is the fundamental of the book, which is most teams, maybe 80% or more of your teams are going to be stream aligned teams. So aligned to the value that aligned to your customer value that your business has. Most of your teams are going to be this type. You want them to be pretty cross-functional, business DevOps type teams so that they can deliver value pretty independently. And then you've got other teams that support those. So the bottom line, the platform team is essentially a team that provides a platform that multiple stream-aligned teams probably consume something off that platform. So you might think of a platform. A good example is something maybe like Azure or AWS. They're great as a kind of platform, but inside your company you might have big legacy platforms or something else that lots of teams consume. So have some platform teams to work that way, and then enabling teams, maybe like kind of consultants that come along and help your stream-aligned teams to learn a new skill or to create a pipeline for deployment or something like that, and then transfer the knowledge to the stream-aligned team, and then they kind of leave and help another team. Complicated subsystem team can be a bit of a combination to hide some fairly complicated structures below that. But essentially, all of those team types are there to reduce the cognitive load of the stream-aligned team. So you think about let's use Microsoft Azure as a good example. Their mission, I don't know to that one, but their mission in Azure really is to reduce the third-party developers' need to know about all the hardware and everything else in the cloud. Like they expose that via documentation and APIs, and hopefully make it easy to consume. That could be arguable, but make it easier to consume. So we want that inside corporates and sort of scale up companies as well. Make it easier for the other teams to work.
I've just found this book on Amazon as well. I'm just gonna put it in the comments for everyone if you want to have a look at the book.
Great book. Buy the book.
I don't. Unfortunately, I didn't get the affiliation link, and I don't get commission for that. You should have told me before this live stream.
I should have given that before. You still got a few minutes to set that up.
I can make my $2. But no. Anyway, guys, so just put the link to this book that Grant just recommended. So if you're interested, probably to look into this more, that would be in this book. But yeah, so anything else you want to mention about these 4 team types?
Oh no, there's a great cartoon from Comic Agile on that explains the 4 team types. We obviously noticed that the complicated subsystem team is all the kind of old people that have been there for quite a while. Maybe that's typical, or that might be the legacy kind of platform or legacy things hidden behind things. I
think the enabling team is actually again coincide with the quote in the beginning that we mentioned about I keep coming back to the quote, because it's basically that enabling team that is supposed to teach competencies to others, but we just do the work ourselves. It's much faster. So we're coming back. We keep coming back to that quote.
That just happens, doesn't it? It's a bit. I mean, this cartoon's a bit of a takeoff, but probably that's what actually happens in reality, isn't it? It never quite works exactly as we design it.
Definitely does in terms of when you need to teach someone, like, yeah, for some people it's easy just to do it themselves than spend twice as much time to, try to teach someone else to do it. And it's great because the work get done, but again, in the long run, we get people who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I think Comic Edge. I don't know, Yana. You have to be quick, but I think Comic Agile might even have a new book out. I don't have that book, but it might be something that everyone can look up. Maybe everyone in the audience can send me the link to that book.
What's the name of the?
There's a Comic Agile book. I don't know the name of it. I don't actually have the
Comic
book.
Agile.
I can find it later on.
The great thing about the live stream, you just Comic Agile Volume 1.
Oh, could be. I'm not sure.
When agility meets reality. Yeah, that looks like.
That sounds like
something.
it. Yeah.
Sounds like that. Anyway, guys, you can probably Google it yourself, but but have a look. Something in this line probably. Just check in the comments as well.
Absolutely, but yeah, buy the buy the Team Topologies book if you're working in a corporate. Maybe not as much for a startup. It's not quite as applicable, but definitely some great ideas around kind of DevOps and team and organizational design and effectively how to split teams as well. That's really the kind of big takeaways out of that book, I think.
Yeah, so you don't get in the Microsoft situation, yeah? Just keep going here.
I'm not sure what that actually means. Maybe they're obviously pretty keen to keep their silos separate in Microsoft. I'm not sure about Oracle either. They seem to have a really big legal department and not so much engineering.
Guys, whoever's still on the line with us, I guess, please let us know if you have any questions. Also, maybe give us some examples, examples that you have in terms of the organizational structure. Did you structure, teams a similar way in terms of, trying to keep them down to 7 and, trying to make them cross-functional, and did it work, how it works in the organization? So if you have any, comments or thoughts, please make sure to put in the comments. It would be great to hear some insight. And Grant, back to you, I guess. Anything else you would like to add so far on the structure of the team? So let's go back to, to our topic in terms of the, tech team structure. So I guess at the end of the day, do we think that teams need to be structured differently? Based on everything that we said, do we think that startup and the corporate need to look at the team differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's there's a real difference there between the team types. Just going back to the start, I feel like everyone's trying to, like, corporates would really love to have the speed, agility, and ideas, innovation that startups want to have. But then, I guess maybe we see the startup team as the ideal team type, where we just have developers that do stuff and they do everything needed to get something out to market and test the value. But then we have all these constraints in corporates that kind of slow us down, like force us to make compromises from that kind of ideal team state. Back to a team that has roles in it that kind of played nicely with the rest of the corporate. So yeah, playing with things like reporting, keeping everyone on track, requirements management, managing dependencies between multiple teams as well. So typically, looking at the roles in those teams, maybe a startup could potentially have a team with just all developers in it. That's in talking to some of the tech companies. That's the way that they go. Even the bigger tech companies seem to have teams with just engineers, software devs within the team, and kind of get stuff done. Whereas, especially in Australia, a lot of our corporates and teams, you're typically looking at roles like a basic Scrum team is going to have a product owner, a Scrum master. But I've seen teams with project managers in there, maybe BAs, a couple of UX designers, all these people are kind of managing and prioritizing requirements, and then they feed those requirements to the developers. So typically, then by that point, corporates have got limits on budgets and that sort of thing. So typically, you're getting a little bit more junior developers than what you have in big tech companies and startups. And so those developers are kind of fed requirements by the other people, and then at the end we've got maybe some testers in the team, or if we're lucky, we get some operations people, and the team gets to deploy, or more likely in a corporate where they're not doing DevOps is they're handing over to other teams to do the final testing and deployment to production.
I guess
So yeah, lots of compromises.
You touch on junior developers there. So in terms of, I guess, we're talking about the startup and the cross-functional team where developers doing like everything. So would
Yeah.
it be, I guess, harder to hire more junior developers if the team's structured that way?
Yeah, I guess in your startup, you have more developers in the team and less other people in the team. I don't know how do startups hire. It's maybe I think for a startup, it's all around getting excitement around the idea, finding developers that have a passion for the idea that you want to develop, and maybe they're willing to accept a lower kind of cash salary or a lower base salary in exchange for more options and things where they can see an upside. In kind of, if they do a good job, the product launches, maybe the company does an IPO, and then therefore those options are worth a lot more to them. So maybe that's the way to get it. But those people are certainly more cross skilled because they've got to do everything needed to launch, develop and launch a product. In a corporate, typically you got limits on what you can pay your staff. It's a pretty tight market in Australia at the moment to get developers. So corporates tend to have a limit on what they'll pay for each position, which tends to limit. So they're tending at the moment, I think, to get a little bit more junior people rather than the kind of rock star developers that you're probably seeing go to more of the high tech companies, Silicon Valley companies, and the Googles and Amazons and that kind of thing, who are probably willing to pay a bit more to get sort of the best developers around.
We have a question from Heath coming up, actually. He was saying BAs are hang up from old corporate model and just add another lossy point in the chain of Chinese whispers. Real innovation happens when you let engineers talk to customers and work out the solution they need, not necessarily implementing what they ask for. What do you think?
I think that's probably spot on. In a startup company, you probably tend not to have BAs. In a kind of tech Silicon Valley companies, you probably don't tend to have. You tend to go without BAs, and yeah, you do just have the engineers talking to customers, getting the real insights in the problems. So yeah, I love that phrase as well. The more Chinese whispers you have between the customer's requirement and the developer, the more information, the more context you're going to lose along the way. So it is important if you do have BAs and UX designers in the team that are kind of having that customer interaction. It's super important to get them to work really closely with the developers to communicate those requirements. But yeah, I think that's true, right? The less handovers you have in a team, the faster you're going to go. The less Chinese whispers you have, the less dilution of the requirements you have, the faster your team is going to go in terms of delivering exactly what customers want and learning what customers want and delivering that to customers.
But that, I guess, the bringing me back to this question about maybe more junior developers. Maybe for some junior developers, it's harder if they need to jump in straight away to environment. They need to speak with the customer and understand the requirements and deliver. So it would be easier for like a more junior people to work in an environment that they do have a BA, because then we basically some that all software developers should have a pretty good communication skills. And which is, some skill that some people need time to develop as well.
Yeah, I mean they don't. Not all software developers have great communication skills, but I think that's spot on. There's a reason for developers in a lot of corporate teams. It is a bit of a hangover from the old kind of waterfall days where we had to gather all the requirements at the start of the project. But yeah, and some corporates do still want that kind of predictability and stability and they do like to gather requirements at the start of any feature development and then hand them off to developers. So yeah, you tend to find developers that are kind of used to working in that environment and probably need a bit of a help to find out what the requirements are. Not maybe where their comm skills aren't as good. They're not maybe comfortable talking to end customers, or potentially in a corporate they're not allowed to talk to end customers as well, which is really interesting. Whereas in a kind of a startup company, you're really looking for developers that are able to talk to customers and really able to understand customers' requirements, so that you have less people involved in figuring out exactly what to develop, and you can probably go a bit faster that way, I'd say.
He was saying that's where you need a balance between senior and juniors, and engineering is communication.
It absolutely is, isn't it? It is about designing something. I like to ask developers how much of their time they actually spend coding, and like you on the surface you'd think that a developer would spend most of their time writing code, but when you ask them, like a kind of junior developer probably spend maybe 40% of their time coding is the typical response I get. Whereas a senior developer, someone who's been around a while, is maybe kind of 10% of their time actually writing code. And the rest of the other 90% of the time is figuring out what to write, right? That's figuring out the requirements, figuring out what customers want. That's most of the job.
Definitely. Grant, I'm just cautious about the time. We already at the 50 minutes mark of our stream. I know we can talk forever and we can really dig into the topic of communication and engineering, but maybe we should keep this topic for next time. Maybe Heath can come and talk about engineering and communication. Here we go. So I'm gonna message Heath after this live stream, and Grant, obviously, we always have this little, giveaway on my live streams, the virtual coffee chat with the speaker. You think about who you're gonna give this giveaway, and I'm gonna announce the topic for the next week. So next week, where is my topic for the next week? I lost it. 1 second. You have extra time while I'm looking for my next speaker. What's the date next week? 19th?
I reckon it's the 19th, isn't it, next week?
Next week, 19th of... Where are we? Here we go. Jana wasn't prepared for this part. Now I need to quick...
I've got a great way to summarise my talk. If you want another minute to find who's on next week.
Yes, please.
I got this phrase from a trainer in human-centered design. I think it's really good. I'm going to live with teamwork makes the dream work.
Nice and simple.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. It's the core functional. It's the core thing that all our teams. It drives our startups. It drives our corporates. If we don't have a great team, it's very difficult to build that and sell that dream to our customers and deliver that kind of value that our teams are there to work towards. So I love the phrase. Yeah.
And I found the speaker for next week. Next week on Wednesday the 19th, we're gonna speak with Anurang, and we're gonna talk about how to shift your career from testing to DevOps. So quite specific topic, and I think probably a lot of test engineers out there might be interested to listen to this. So Anurang did this transition himself and gonna share his experience and some challenges and he faced and the things he learned on his way. So that's next week on 19th of October. And while I was doing that, Grant, did you pick who you're gonna go for virtual coffee?
I really liked the first question from Rob, which was getting a view on how teams interact together. So I really, yeah, love that question. That is the core of it, isn't it? Is how do we all interact together? How do we work together as a team and even team of teams? So yeah, love to explore it a bit more.
Perfect. Rob, please connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't done so, or maybe just send me a quick message on LinkedIn so I can match you from YouTube because I can't recognize you in your, with your penguin face. So if you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, please, then I can connect you with the Grant and organize the virtual coffee chat. So I think, we kind of already summarized, our discussion and talk about teamwork as a dream work. But I guess, Grant, just for put you on the spot to finish this stream, is there any, your favorite inspirational quote or something, just something you live by, or anything you can share with us to finish this live stream today?
Yeah, look, I think this is really one of the most important things in scaling in corporates, and I think designing teams is a real skill that we don't, like, a lot of managers don't get taught how to do that. So I think one of the most important things: design the teams. Think about Conway's. We didn't talk about Conway's law, but designing the teams according to how you want the software to work together. Designing the interfaces of the software to be the same as the interfaces between the teams. Really important.
This one?
Yeah, there we go. That's the one. Conway's law is think about how to split your teams and in the most efficient way to be able to minimise that forced communication between the teams and allow them to work as fast as they can, as independently as they can, and deliver value as efficiently as they can to their customers.
Perfect. Thank you, Grant, for your time today. We finished on time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Yana.
Just before 6:30. Thank you for efficiency. And thank you, everyone who joined us tonight. So I hope to see you all next Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Thank you so much, Grant, again. I'll make sure I'll connect you with Rob. And I'll see everyone next time.